Welcome back to another video. I've had a request to do a laboratory bathroom sink. So we're just going to be doing kind of a basic sink that's going to be a little bit modern. The nice thing with sinks is that when you're working with modern ones, there's a little bit easier way to actually go about doing sinks, right? You can have some really cool designs where you have like an arcing kind of flow, right? So like you could have, for instance, in Google Images, so you could have a really nice flow of just simple, rounded rectangles coming out of a sink, and you can play around with some really neat features. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go into some of these features, and I can show you some cool techniques that you could use to do various different types of sinks. So the first thing I like to do is when I'm working with assets that are primarily going to be used as a game asset object, I always like importing some sort of FBX character model to get an idea of what size this is going to be looking like. So I'm going to quickly import a character model. This is what I'm going to be working with. So we're going to go ahead and import a cube, which is what we're going to be working with. So we're going to scale this down, and I think this is a good spot for a nice sink. I'm just going to scale it probably about there, and we're going to go from there. So let's go ahead and we're going to hide this. We're going to delete the character armature, and we're going to bring back this. We're going to name this sink, and I'm going to go ahead and save this file. This file, most likely for the project I'm working on, is going to be a building asset, and it's going to be labeled as bathroom sink 1. So we're going to go ahead and name it like that. So we're going to go in, we're going to go for a top view. And what we're going to do is we're going to go straight into edit mode. And I like adding some supporting edge loops that will serve as kind of a boundary line to make sure that everything is symmetrical. So we're going to go ahead and throw these down. We're going to go ahead and remove these. Make sure you're in edit mode just to be safe. Dissolve edges. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to do S, and then we are going to do Y. And then we're going to drag it to the boundary, and we're going to do that. And then we are going to go ahead and we're going to do these now, and we're going to do S and then X, and we're going to drag these to the boundaries. A good way to go about this is make sure you have a perfect square right here. So it's going to be looking like that. So then after we've completed that, we're going to switch into wireframe mode. And just for if in case you forgot, you want to make sure you have a lower poly count if you're working with game assets. So we're going to go ahead and go into the viewport overlays, and we're going to go down and click on statistics. And if you see, it's going to pop into the top left hand corner right here, and it's going to be triangles, which, half your triangle count will be our poly count. So right now we have a poly count of 30. So we are going to go from here. So we're going to drag these in. So we're going to select all these in wireframe mode. Reason being is it's going to select the top and the bottoms, which is why we really want to have that. So we're going to drag it in just slightly, just like that. And as you can see, we have some nice things, but if you look, you can see that these are going to have an issue where they are not going to be on the same Z axis. So you're going to want to have these all selected. And we're going to go into the one viewpoint, and we're going to go into here so we can get a nice good viewpoint. We're going to do S, and this time we're going to hit Z. We're going to drag it up until it is nice and flat. So that way the sink will now be exactly how we would want it to be. So far this is coming out to be pretty cool. So I'm going to go back into the one, and I'm going to drag this up because I don't need this as long as this is. So there's a few things that we can do here. We can immediately start working and saying we like the box shape, we're going to keep it like this, or we can do some nice work around the edges. And I'm going to do some work around the edges because I want the sink to look a little bit better than what it does look right now. So what I'm doing is I'm doing Control R to add in edge loops, and we're just going to be adding these in. So we got some nice edge loops coming in here. And we're going to do a Control Smooth later. We're just not doing that right now. So, and we got some good definition going on right now. Got some nice, it's a nice looking sink. We're going to drag this up again just a bit. I'm going to drag it down. So the thing with 3D modeling is it is a lot of technical work. So you're going to be working and just, you know, playing around, seeing how things work, kind of getting an idea of what this is going to entail. And this is not too bad. The issue that I am seeing right now is the sink has this weird bevel on the sides. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try something really quick. So if you look, this is not straight. I don't like that. I like being straight like this. So what we're going to do is do S and then X, and then we're going to bring it in until we're on the midline. So just right about there, and we have nice, perfect edges. So we're going to keep doing that. So this is starting to look pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and select these. We're going to go into the top view again. We're going to hit Control and hold that down, and we're going to select this area and then release. And it's just doing this, so we're just going to do this again until we get to the point where we only have these selected. Now the reason why we're doing this is we're going to drag this out just slightly to where we can get a nice little sink right here, right? And if you want some cleaner angles, what we would do is we would just add in some more edge loops there, and we would do the same thing as we did before, going above, hold Control, select, hold Control, select, and then you have that done. So then we're going to drag this out again. Got that done, and it's looking pretty cool. So now we're going to add another edge loop. Going to bring this in right here, and for good measure we're going to bring this one right here, and I'm going to add this one right here because I'm actually thinking ahead with what I want to do, and I'm going to go ahead and do a model according to a certain way. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into face mode. We're going to select this right here, and we're going to press E, which is your extrude, and we're going to go down. Now you can just eyeball it if you really wanted to, or you could do it in a very tactful way. So we're going to press 1, we're going to go into wireframe mode, and we're going to press E, and now we can see how much space we have to work with. So I'm going to drop it down to this level, go back into the solid viewpoint, and now we've got a very generic sink working right here. Now, as we're working with this, you can see it looks pretty thick with what we're working with, right? The front of it seems a lot thicker than generically what we would want. We can test it out and press S, and we can drag it kind of down to where we can kind of get a little bit more definition with the sink, and do SX and drag it in or drag it out. I'm going to drag it out just slightly. And then I'm going to go into the 3, which is going to be my side view. I'm going to go back into wireframe mode. And what I am going to do is a little bit of detail work. So I'm going to see about going and dragging some of this stuff in. So we're going to go G, Y. And we are just going to be dragging some stuff. So just quickly dragging, getting some stuff figured out. And I'm going to drag that there. I could test it and see how that works. Not liking how that's working, so I'm just going to drag it there. So we're going to go back into solid view, see how this turned out. This isn't too bad. I'm not liking how these edges are working here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing some work here. So I'm going to start selecting these, and we're going to do S, and we're going to drag in, and then we're going to select, and we're going to select. And you know what? It's in the same way there, so I want to make sure we're working symmetrically. It's always important to work symmetrically with your models. So we're going to drag it in. Got a nice dragon. Going to select these. Select these. I'm just going to go around, make sure we got it all selected. And we're going to drag it in one more time. And So far, I am liking how this is looking. That being said, there's something going on with the midline here, and and like I said, there's a lot of detail work, and I'm going to show problem solving with just doing some various little tasks within what you're working with. So we're just going to make sure we are going and getting everything how it wants to be. So we're going to drag this in, and that's going to give us a little bit cleaner in some regard. I'm going to leave it like this because I'm not having a big issue, because if we go in object mode and shade smooth, it's looking pretty good, so we're not going to worry about that. Now, if you shade smooth right now, as you can see, it looks incredibly weird. The reason why it looks weird is we do not have something called an edge loop, or a supporting edge loop. Sorry about that. So a supporting edge loop. Supporting edge loops are what help define the shape, and that's usually done pretty much near the end stage of a project, just to make sure that you're getting the definition that you really want with the model. So we're going to go back into edit mode. And as I was showing before, I had put this edge loop here, and for good reason. So we're going to go ahead and select this, and I am going to do SX because I want to drag this in. And we're going to do E and drag this out like so. And after you hit E, you don't have to hit E again. You can just do GZ and drag it out more. So we're going to go into edge loop, and we're going to select the wireframe mode. So we're going to select these, and we're going to drag it G, and then we're going to hit Y, and we're going to drag like this. Now what we're going to do now is rotate on the X axis, that's R and then X, and then we're going to do GY, and then GZ, and then we're going to drag it down, and then R, X like before. And I like to know where I'm going to be ending up, so I'm going to do this. Drag it down, making sure it's on the same level. G, Y, and it's going to be like that. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be dragging around and making sure that our sink faucet is how we want it to be. Right? So we're just, at this point, we're just cleaning it up, giving it that nice rotation that we need to make it be the faucet that we want it to be. Just slowly moving it around, making sure. And as you can see, our poly count is still incredibly low. We're still doing really well with our poly count, which is incredibly important. Whoops. Did something there I didn't like. Rotate X. GY. And it's not too bad. There's a few ways we can go about doing it. So we could have the water, come out via this way and pour out, which is not a bad way to go about doing it. It's like we could do SC. But in our case, I'm going to be doing it a little bit different. So I just changed my mind just now. So what we're going to do is we're going to rotate X, GZ, that's dropping it down, GY, rotate X, GZ, GY, and what we are doing is we are creating a nice modern faucet. We're making sure that everything is how we want it to be. So this is pretty nice so far. I'm content with the way this looks. Now if I wanted to, I could just do SC and it would do that and bring that down, which is not bad. So we're going to go back into edge mode. So we're going to bring this here. this here, and good, it did it on the other side too. I was worried about that. So now we're going to go into 7 wireframe mode, and we're going to deselect these extra edges here. And the reason we are doing this is I am going to attempt to do something. So make sure these are selected too. So we're going to do SX. We're going to bring this out a bit. What we are doing is we are giving the sync a little bit extra. It's a bevel, right? It's a little bit extra definition there, which is really nice. And we're going to do it on the top too. So we're going to drag it there, drag it there. I'm going to go ahead, dissolve edges, because we don't really need that. So we're going to go in here, and we're going to go ahead and deselect all this extra, all that extra stuff. So then we're going to go back in here, and the reason I'm going back through and selecting these edges is if we do not do that, there's going to be some overlapping with the UVs, and we don't want that. It's going to make UV wrapping kind of a nightmare. And we really don't want that. So we got a fairly good sync, right? If you're concerned about people somehow seeing up here, what you could do is press the face here. I need to bring it in slightly. And we're going to do E, bring it up. And I'm going to inset it, which is going to give it an edge loop. So it's going to be I and inset. And we've insetted it just slightly. Go into edge mode. And we're going to go ahead and do that. It's nice and cleaned up. So, like I stated before, we're going to be working on edge loops. Now, I want to clarify something. At this point, I could go ahead and do a sync. And do a sync drain within my sync. And I will show you quickly how you would go ahead and do that. But I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate on a cube because it's going to require putting in a lot more edge loops here. And I don't want to accidentally deface the model and damage it in some way. So what we are going to do is we could always duplicate it, but it's much easier to demonstrate like this. So we're going to Shift A, and we are going to bring in a cube as our example. And it's because we are in edit mode. So if you go in here, I messed up. So always make sure you're in the right mode. So that's about on me. Okay, so we're going to do Shift A. We're going to bring in a cube. A period on your numpad actually allows you to, move quickly to what you're looking at. So we're going to do Control R, and we are going to be creating some edge loops really quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and do some more. I'm going to do 7 to get a view, and we're going to go ahead and select faces. And I'm going to select a little bit bigger. So like let's say this is the bottom of your sync. You've made these edge loops on your sync. You would right click, loop tools, and choose circle, and this would create the circle drain that you would want. And you could put E to extrude, and you could create your drain this way, right? And then you could do I to inset, and you can inset it just slightly to get your edge loops you wanted to, and drag this up, and kind of get that definition you would really want for your cube really quickly. I'm just throwing in some quick edge loops here so you guys can see what this would look like. Okay, and yeah, you would have a nice little drain here, and then you could just go ahead and texture that. And you can make the actual drain as deep as you would want. The reason why we don't do that with what we were doing is when we are working with models, you have to be thinking of your poly count. And when you're thinking of your poly count, you don't want to go over the poly limit because it could cause games and stuff that you're working with to lag more than it really needs to. If you're just working with a simple animation and you're not really wanting to worry about poly limit and you're working all within Blender, go crazy. You know, go ahead, do it that way, extrude down, make your drain. You can do it various different ways. You can even use various add-ons and tools and, you know, booleans to create what you would want within your model. And we're not going to really be working with stuff like this with what we want to have done. So don't worry about this. What we would want to have is have this done in the texturing process because it would just be applied as a texture and it's going to be much nicer. So now we're at the point where we're going to be working with edge loops. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be selecting this bottom face here. We're going to be pressing I once, dragging it in slightly, and as you can see, it's given us a nice little loop cut around the area. And we need a second loop cut, and we're going to drag it there, another one up top. And this is where you can start having higher poly count, is the loop cut process, because this is what's going to help define its edges. And if you didn't really have this, because we want to smooth this, right? So if we did not have this in, we're going to lose a lot of that smoothing information that we so desperately would want with our model. And we're going to do the same thing with the faucet. So we're going to grab that down and drag that down. And I'm not entirely certain if I would want to have this defined. I think I would, because we're going to be applying a smoothing information to most of the object. So I'm going to go ahead and have this defined. And we'll figure out. This is a little weird. There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and smooth this real fast. I want to see how this will turn out. Okay, this is turning out really good. So as you can see, we've put some loop cuts here already, and you see some really weird definitions going on right here, and that's probably because we do not have the correct edge loops here. There is no edge loop, so we're going to have to go ahead and add these edge loops. You can see the color, kind of the shading there, changing slightly. That's because we're adding in the edge loops correctly, and we're adding in the definition that we need. And then we would drag that down. And we have some nice edge loops, and we're going to add some edge loops up here too. As you can see, our poly count is jumping up quite high. Not the best thing, but sometimes it's unavoidable with what you're working on. If you wanted to, I will show you guys something really quick. If you guys wanted to, cool. After this is what our model looks like in a semi-finished state, and we're sitting at probably about 1500 to 1600 poly count. And if you guys wanted to have a lower poly count, which you always want to, with your models, you generally would want to clean up a lot of that stuff. So you can clean up some of the extra edge loops that are not really needed, and go through and clean up a lot of the areas. And you would not want to do delete and dissolve edge, because this is what happens when you delete edge. You see, we got some issues going on here. It just deletes the actual model itself. We do not want that. Instead, we want delete dissolve edges, and that's going to dissolve the edge, and it's going to reconfigure based on the edges that are there. Make sure you're not creating, ingons, or you're creating other things, because programs like ZBrush and certain engines can have issues with that. Now, I do understand newer programs like Substance Painter and Unreal Engine 2 are really going in a new direction where ingons are not really a problem, but there are some programs out there that have not gotten to that point and will not get to that point. So you ought to understand what is an ingon. And an ingon is one that's got an exceeding number of sides that's greater than 4. So make sure you guys are not working with ingons. That being said, know what you're working with, because it may not really be an issue. So we're going into edit mode. We're going to double check. This all looks fairly good with what we're working with. There might be some issues here, and you can always check that, because if you wanted to, you could add another edge loop and test to see what's working. But I'm actually quite satisfied with what I made here today. If I was doing a professional model, I would spend more time and clean up the corners here and make sure that the corners would come out a lot better than what they are right now, because I want to have the best maximum model that I'm working with, and there are many other ways to do that. Also, if you are working with a sink that's got a rounded fixture that's coming out, the method I showed previously with the loop tools, creating the circle, extruding out for the drain, can be used to extrude upwards to create a cylinder object that can be utilized as a, rounded water spigot. So keep that in mind. So we're going to go into UV editing now. I'm not going to spend the excess time in UV editing in Blender. I'm simply going to do UV editing, press A to select all. We're going to click here, view, overlays, stretching. As you can see, there's stretching. That's because we haven't UV wrapped yet. We're going to press U, and we're going to do Smart UV Project. Now, Smart UV Project is going to have Blender compute the UV for us automatically. And as you can see, it did a fairly decent job. But if you are working with a professional model, please make sure that you are taking the time to UV correctly and getting it the best way possible, because most of the time doing a quick and easy UV project may not be the best way for you to work with what you're working with. So now that we have this UV wrapped, we have this model the way we want it to, the smoothing information is conveyed. We're going to do File, Export, FBX. Now, FBX and OBJ are the biggest exports that we would want. OBJ not necessarily needs as much UV mapping information, while FBX requires that. The FBX, if you're working with a game asset, you want to use FBX. The reason you would want to use FBX is what helps convey the animations inside of it. It helps convey a lot of the data information that you would need that's going to be processed over to maybe a 3D printing or 3D texturing software, or a game ready asset, or even 3D printing software that you would print this asset as an actual asset. So FBX is usually a really good method. Once again, it just depends with what you're working with. I haven't done too much work with Unity, but I assume it's the same way. So if we had multiple assets within our scene, most likely what we would choose selected object. Now my object is selected, so it's not a big deal. If it's the only thing in your collection scene, you can just have that unchecked. It's not a big deal. But for this case, I'm going to do selected objects. There's no animation, so we don't really need a bacon animation. Make sure that it's labeled how you would want it to. It's going to where you want it. And we're going to export FBX. Now we're going to save before exiting. We're going to exit out. And the first thing I like to do is click into your model. And if you're working with Windows 10, it's going to open the Windows 3D model viewer. And for some reason, it is not wanting to work. So here we go. It's now working. Just took a moment. So this is looking really good, and I like jumping through different things because sometimes you can have issues with your UVs, and this is looking really good. I really like with what is going on here. I don't really see any face issues. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is ready for texturing. And in this video, I'll just show you a really quick texturing process with Substance Painter. Now you can use Mixamer, you could use, or Mixer, I think is what it's called. You could use Substance Painter, you could even use Photoshop, or even Blender itself. And if you were working with Blender itself, you would go through a completely different process and go into the materials menu and kind of adjust it from there. And you can even get into nodes if you really wanted to work with that. For the sake of this project, I'm going to be showcasing Substance Painter. So I'm going to be working with a 512 texture, and we're going to go bathroom sink. We're going to open, if it will allow us to open it, and we're going to press OK. So it's going to load in our model. We're going to give it one quick look. May not look correctly because what we have to do is bake the information onto our model so that way we can correctly texture this. We're going to uncheck ID. By default, it is set to 512 regardless of what you set the document to, so make sure it's 512. If you want a 1024 or change the output resolution, you could always do that here. So let's change to the 1024. So we're going to bake selected textures. So we've baked the selected textures and we've got our nice model here. So we can work with materials, and we can work with smart materials. So since this is just showcasing some stuff, I'm actually going to have some fun and do a stylized design for what I'm going to be working with. So I'm going to do a stylized sink. So we're going to go ahead and work with the metal. We're going to go into layers. We're going to add a black mask. And actually, I'm going to work with a white mask this time. I've been having more fun with working with white masks for lately. So just going around making sure that we're not getting any information that we don't want. Cool. Got a little bit there, want to get rid of. And we got a nice looking handle right here. And if we wanted to, we can change some of the information based on what we were working with. So we can brighten that up just slightly. So then we want a stylized base. So let's see if I have any stylized materials that I would want to work with. This is a nice stylized that I'm working with, but I kind of want to do some different types of work. So we're going to go ahead, base layer. I'm going to drop that down. But you're seeing it here, first time, just working and fiddling around. This is technically a Ghibli stylized texture, so it's going to be very different with what we're working with. That's for if you're working with a different type of software, I would say. And I don't want the mask, so move mask. So I'm actually going to be a little clever here. I'm going to see if I can go through, make a porcelain sink out of a texture like this. So we have dirt here. So I'm going to work with the levels and see, work with the mask editor. Got some stuff here. So we're going to go down to the base, the roughness, and we're going to turn the roughness down. Okay. Drag that down here. Got a fairly decent sink. Nothing too crazy. I'm going to actually go ahead, since this is a stylized, add a fill layer, remove color, height, metal, normal, and take the roughness and drag it up slightly. Interesting. It's actually not wanting to work with. I'm gonna add a black mask. We're gonna do that. See, we want a little sheen to it, but not too much. But yeah, this is a good way to kind of fiddle around, make sure you got a nice sink. But this is a stylized sink that you might use for any sort of project. And I also mentioned before texturing a drain. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go through here. I'm going to add a... I'm going to go ahead and do this. For some reason, mine has a mask attached to it. I need to add a new mask. So when you're working with adding details, usually this is how you would want to go about it. So we're going to look for drains, circle. I'm trying to find one that I would really want to work with because I got various tools I have that could work. This could work pretty well. And then we're going to go ahead and drop it. I'm not sure I like that one, so I'm going to grab this one instead. Cool. That's not layered how I would want it to be. So we're going to go back into this. We're going to do stylized base, and I'm going to see if I can drag the height down a little bit. So we got a lower height map. As you can see, when you zoom up, you can kind of tell, but if you're far away, you know, you can't really tell too much. And this is going to be a smaller asset that you're going to be working with, and if you wanted to, you can go ahead, have this rendered out. And you got a nice little sink that you can work with within your project. And you can do this so many different ways and utilize this in various different formats that you would really want to do. Like if you were working with, say, a realistic model, right? You know, you may not want to have some of the detail that's being conveyed. Like you may want to have porcelain, right? So let's go into, I don't know if I have a porcelain. I'm not sure if I have something that would be good for something like this. I have a base setup that I have, but I can go ahead and drop that. And this could be a semi-realistic sink. If it was me, I would want to head and put in a lot more detail. This is a little bit too plain for my taste. Maybe I have something in here that we can use. No, I don't have any porcelain. Okay, but you could play around. You could do some really nice sinks, right? It just depends on what you're wanting to work with, and you can do the drain the same way we were doing before. But you know, and you would export it. You file, export textures. You would choose your destination, 8 bits plus dithering. If we're working with Unreal Engine 4 packed, and then we would export it. Since we're not going to be utilizing this, we're not exporting it. But hopefully this helps you understand, you know, good ways to do sinks and just the various ways we do them. So enjoy.